Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all. Thank you for the slight delay. We had a slight issue that we were just sorting out before we started to make sure the presentations all worked. So sorry for keeping you on hold for 5 minutes. Time you won't get back. But it's really good to see you all. My name's Ewan Leach. I'm the Chief Executive of SURF, and welcome to People in Practice Network, a policy network that looks at how various policies are working for communities across Scotland. And I suppose from a SURF perspective, we're primarily interested in how policy can improve the lives of those whose lives need the most improved. Today, we are looking at just one topic. Sometimes we look at two, but today we are looking at one topic and we're doing a deep dive, looking at sort of policy legislative slide and then learning from one particular case study where that has been used. And what we're actually looking at is ownerless properties today. And so the first presentation we have this morning is from Richard Frew and David Stewart from the Kings and Lords Treasurer's Remembrancer, often known as KLTR. It's probably the fanciest title we've had to present at SURF. So we're honoured to have you here this morning. And what Richard and David do is run through really the background to the ownerless properties agenda, some changes that have happened within, I suppose, the past 18 months, which have opened things up for communities in a way that they maybe weren't available before. And so they will give a presentation, then we'll have a Q&A, then we'll have a break at 10:50, and beginning again at 11, we'll then hear from Craig Brooks, who is one of the first kind of community beneficiaries of this process as the Friends of Campsie High Kirk, and find out about what it looked like from their side. Obviously, it's probably going to be positive because we wouldn't have this case study presented if they were going to say no, it's dreadful. But we thought it would be interesting to hear from both sides of the experience of.
After my presentation, I hope it's not the last one.
We hope not too as well, Craig. But we'll see. And then we'll wind up around 12 o'clock. After another Q&A for Craig, so you can find out from the community's perspective as well. So that's all from me. If somebody's not on mute, that's fine, so that we're not getting feedback. Craig, do you want to mute your? Thanks very much. And I will now just hand over to Richard and David so that we can hear from KLTR about their organisation and about the process around ownerless properties. Over to you. You're muted, Richard.
Apologies. Thanks very much, Ewan. It was on audio. When I started, it seemed to jump, but hopefully it's okay for the duration of the. Is that better? Can you hear me, Ewan?
We can totally hear you fine. Yes.
Oh, good, excellent. Okay, I'll just display our slides. We don't have many. We've got half a dozen or so. Hopefully it won't take too long. But if we are running beyond the time you want us to, Ewan, please do.
I'll let you know.
And feel free to give us a 5-minute warning or whatever. Can you see the slides now?
They're all clear.
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you very much. Right. As Ewan says, we're the Kings and Lord Treasurer's Remembrancer. Well, we aren't. We're officials in the KLTR's office. You'll see from the first slide our positions within KLTR, and I agree with you. And it's much easier to say KLTR than it is to have all these words if they don't trip off your tongue. But I'll quickly head on to the next slide. I'll be doing some of the slides. David will be doing the others, so we'll pass back and forward at times. But I'll certainly, David, I'll let you know when I'm switching slides. Right. So, who's the Kings and Lord Treasurer's Remembrancer? And I did say I would say KLTR. So, who's the KLTR? Well, the KLTR at the moment is John Logue. He's the Crown's representative in Scotland for all ownerless property. He's also the Crown Agent, head of prosecution in Scotland. So he's got quite a big responsible portfolio with his prosecution stuff. And being the KLTR is a small, but he regards it as a very important part of his role. He's very keen to keep in touch with how we're doing in KLTR, and I met him only yesterday to talk through a few things in passing on the train. So it was a very interesting conversation I had with John, but he's very interested in what we're doing with bona vacantia property, which probably takes me on to the second point. What is bona vacantia? That's Latin for ownerless goods. The KLTR has responsibility for a number of different types of ownerless goods. First and foremost, as most of you will know, ownerless goods comes in the shape of property, land and property, or land and buildings. And mostly we get our properties from dissolved companies. And that's by far the bulk of our work under the land and buildings portfolio, which David and I are responsible for. We have an operations team, a small operations team that take cases forward, which is the ownerless property transfer scheme, which we'll cover shortly. But also our newest scheme, which is the proactive bona vacantia project. And I can say a wee bit about that, Ewan, if we've got time and if you're interested, but I appreciate we're here to cover OPTS today. So bona vacantia also includes the ultima series property, which is, in short, where when a person dies and they have no will and no next of kin, then the property or their estate is passed to the Crown. That's known as ultimus aries. Most cases we do find a relative appears, and there's so many heir hunters these days that we usually do find relatives. But sometimes we can't, and all their belongings come to the Crown. The third and last but not least is treasure trove, with metal detectorists, etc. We have a treasure trove process. It's just been reviewed, and that's a really interesting piece of work. They're all two of these, treasure trove and bona vacantia property, are both under my remit, and I get involved in the ultima series as well. So that's a brief overview of KLTR. So while we're here, what is OPTS? And I'll just before I go into the detail, I will try and keep it high level at the moment, and we do have a Q&A session afterwards, so feel free to ask any questions then, and we can clear any points up, hopefully. But you'll see also on the slide a few photos there of the types of bona vacantia ownerless property that we get, as well as land and buildings. Sheep, barrels of whiskey, and we've just recently, for whiskey lovers amongst you, we've just recently had a company that's been dissolved, and I'm anxiously waiting to see how many barrels of whiskey we have. So that could be, if you pardon the description, that could be quite a tasty case, that. And obviously cars. We don't get a lot of, they're called collectively movables. We don't get a lot of these movables, and they're normally dealt with pretty quickly. We certainly, in most cases, we don't take care of livestock, and a lot of sheep in some of the islands just roam freely and they belong to nobody. They don't come to the Crown normally. So OPTS. What is OPTS? I'll take you forward to the next slide. David, you're going to cover this slide, but before you do, just to let viewers familiarise themselves with the slide, I'll say briefly what OPTS is. Most, or some of the viewers may well be well aware by now what OPTS is about. It's been going for some time. March 24, I think it was launched. If I don't get my years mixed up, it seems like a long time. But the OPTS process itself, and David will describe how it fits into the KLTR, the wider KLTR process. The OPTS itself is, when I was designing it, I tried to make it as simple as possible. And some of you may well be sitting there cringing and thinking it's not simple at all. But property transfer is, it has its challenges at times. But hopefully the process is reasonably simple with our support. But I'm more than happy for Craig to go into the detail of what could be improved as well, because I want to hear of any suggestions for improvement as well as what worked well. So a brief overview is that when we're notified of a property, any property, whether it's an individual or a community group or whoever, we're notified of the property. That starts our process, and in particular, our 3-year disclaimer deadline. If we're asked to disclaim the property by the notifier, then we only have a 12-month period. So it's drastically reduced if somebody specifically asks us to disclaim the property if they want it. That doesn't mean to say they'll get it, because we have to go through the OPTS process if it's suitable. Now, right at the start of the process, we have options. Again, David will go through some of the options, but one of the options is OPTS. We have other options. I won't steal David's thunder, but if it's suitable for OPTS, we then need to be satisfied that we ourselves believe that there's enough information from the notifier to determine that the property is ownerless, first of all. And if it is, we can consider the options. OPTS itself, there's a simple overview in the OPTS guidance on page 5 of the guidance. It gives 5 easy steps of the OPTS. So we have establishing its BV, as I say, it's ownerless. Then, if it is, we go through what we call the trawl process. We use the Scottish Government's trawl to start with. For public bodies. So we notify public bodies first, and I'll come on to that in later slides and when we look at the criteria. We first notify public bodies, but at the same time, we also, in our trawl process, we notify local authorities and any community interests. Now, we have 3 excellent partners delivering our OPTS process. Highlands and Islands Enterprise cover their area, the HIA area. We have Development Trust Association Scotland, covering central Scotland, and also feeding into the larger area as well. And obviously for the borders in lower Scotland areas, we have South of Scotland Enterprise. So we have these delivery partners to help notify communities of a property. If there's any interest from public body, then that's the process stopped as far as sharing. Now, we would expect whoever in the property, whether it's a public body, local community group, that they would all work collaboratively. And one of the aims of the scheme is to ensure that there is collaborative working. And it benefits communities if you work early with your local authority, because from the trawl process, they'll know about the property anyway, they'll be notified. But if a public body doesn't want the property, and we haven't had a public body, to be honest, that has been interested yet. It's more really disposal of property from public bodies these days rather than taking on properties, especially the types of properties we get, which tend to be run down. And Craig will give an excellent example of a particular type of property that we get. If the property isn't, if the public body isn't interested, then we offer it to the local authority. If the local authority isn't interested in ownership, then we offer it to the community sector. Now, there's two ways the local authority can work. They can either take ownership or they can assist the community if there's a community interest. And we've been encouraging local authorities to look at the 6-month period that they have to determine what they do. Within that 6-month period, again, I won't go into too much detail, but it's split into 2 3-month periods for good reason. One is the first 3 months is to consider if they want to take ownership. But if they don't, they have a further 3 months to, or even if they do, they have a further 3 months to provide information on what they're going to do with it. Or they can support the community within that 6-month period. So what we've been doing is we've been advising local authorities, even if they aren't interested in ownership, but they know that there's a community interest there, to hang fire and not tell us on day one, because that 6-month period allows the community to have an extra 6 months or up to an extra 6 months to prepare if they are interested. So it's quite valuable time, half a year for the community to use if they work with the local authority, and the local authority informs us at the 6-month time scale, as long as it's within the 6 months. So then obviously the next step is if the community is interested, and obviously this is your bag we're getting into now. If the community is interested, the reason we notify everybody at the start is so that the community sector is involved right from the start. They're not waiting to see whether public bodies take ownership or whether local authorities want to. They're right in there at the front, and they can go and speak to the local authority and say, well, look, we've got this proposal. Can you work with us? And I'd suggest you do that as communities. And it saves a bit of to-ing and fro-ing if the local authority has a proposal of its own and the community has a different proposal. Then you can both speak together about what is the best proposal for that area. So it's a useful 6 months to speak with your local authority. So that's just the start of the process. There's various steps that I won't go into in detail, but I mentioned the local authority timescales there. If the local authority is interested in either taking ownership or supporting the community, once they notify us, the community will get a further 2 months to say, and it's only to say whether you're interested in taking ownership. It's not to provide the proposals or that, or in any great detail. Now, we can adjust the timescales, but we do want to try and stick to the timescales because of our 3-year disclaimer deadline, or in this case, 12 months. Or in some cases 12 months. Now, if it's 12 months, we will tell you straight away. We won't leave it to you've responded or whatever. We'll give you as much information as we can straight away. You'll also get a copy of the valuation that the KLTR undertakes at the time we circulate the trawl. So there's quite a bit of information there for you if you want to take it. And obviously, you can speak to us about your proposals, and it's quite handy to speak with us early on if you're interested. Now, the reason we set out that public body first, local authority second, and community third doesn't mean to say that you're at the end of the line, because we still have other interests, personal interests or private interests, commercial interests, etc. The reason is we'll come into it more in the criteria with public interest. But I'll just say just now that that process is to do with public interest and determining public interest. For OPTS, public interest is defined geographically. So the bigger area, the whole of Scotland, is the area that public bodies cover and Scottish ministers. So they have first refusal. Then you would normally get a local authority area being the next geographic area. And then within that, a specifically defined community area. So that's the reason we've gone down that geographic route for public interest. But when we come to the public interest criterion, you'll then hear what else we take into account. After we get an application from whoever it might be, and we've got a process established under OPTS, we then assess the application. We can, if we need to or want to, we can refer the application to our independent OPTS advisory panel, made up of various members from different, some may well be here, I haven't checked the audience in detail, but some of you may be here who are members of the panel from, for example, HIE, Crown Estate Scotland, etc. So we have an expert panel that we can refer applications to for advice. They're not a decision-making panel, it's purely an advisory panel, but it's very, very helpful to have experts in the community sector to help us with the decision-making process. Once the decision's made, and we'll do that as early as we can also get back to the applicant for further information if we want to, but we'll then issue the decision letter to the applicant. Now, if the applicant's a community body, please, when you get the decision letter, we have had a community that their application has been refused. I think it's inevitable with schemes like this and with community right to buy, etc. Not all applications will be successful. But take time to think about the decision letter and the content of it, in particular the reasons for it, and come and talk to us about the decision letter if you want to. Yes, there's no formal route of appeal within the OPTS process, but you can raise a complaint, or if you're not happy with the decision, appeal the decision to the court. But before people start running to the courts, I would always say, look, it's very time consuming, it's costly, so let's talk about the decision and we can go through it then. So it's aimed at being helpful. And hopefully, I appreciate how disappointed communities will be if they get a rejection letter, but there's only been one I recall off the top of my head, and it's important that we put a lot of effort into getting a good quality application early on in the process. Makes it easier for everybody, and then if it's successful, back to the happy side of the process, if it's successful, then the community body will get 8 months, as with community right to buy, to transfer the property, to conclude the conveyancing, etc., transfer the funds. Now, under OPTS, we transfer, the transfer value is £1 plus the KLTR's professional costs. That would be the cost of the valuation and the cost for solicitors. Now, we keep both of these costs to a minimum. If an applicant asks us to do other tests, we would normally say, well, say environmental tests, we would normally encourage them to do it because they know what they want to test for, etc. So that's a brief. I appreciate a sort of whirlwind overview of the OPTS process. It is designed to be as simple as possible. But David, do you want to? Your slide's been up for a wee while now, so do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I was just going to very briefly say, I think the main point I would want to make, thanks Richard, on this slide in the funnel is, I suppose it really sets out the hierarchy of what the KLTR would like to do with ownerless land. What happens when sites are referred to us or properties are referred? We have a kind of internal triage process where you look at what a site would be suitable for. but it's quite a significant shift that the KLTR's moved to looking to dispose of properties in the public interest, as Richard said, for £1 plus cost. And really our focus is very much on community benefit and public benefit. So in a way, for any site, our ideal outcome would be that it goes through the OPTS or this proactive BV scheme and is reused in the public interest. And we'll go on to say a little bit about the criteria we use to assess whether a project's suitable. But I would say I think there's quite useful information on the website. So if people are interested, they can have a look afterwards. If we decide that a property is not suitable for OPTS, then the next level down would be we'd look at disposing it to a private buyer, and income would then go to the General Scottish Fund. If there's not a private buyer available, it would go to auction. And if that's not successful, then Richard talked about the 3-year timescale. We would ultimately disclaim the site, say that the Crown had no interest, and it would truly be ownerless at that point. But yeah, just to emphasise, I think the main thing is that we're keen to support communities, public bodies, local authorities, and see underused and vacant sites reused in the public interest. And I'll pass back to Richard now.
Okay, thanks, David. Just to summarise, OPTS is our preferred option by far, and trying to get properties back into effective use to benefit communities. So that's that. You know, the other options do come after that. I've gone through. I think we can quickly just skip through as a resume of the process with this slide. So Ewan, don't panic. I won't take as long with other slides. I hope anyway. So the KLTR establishes the property as ownerless. We advertise, that's the trawl that I mentioned. We advertise the property. Now, in the trawl, public bodies get 1 month, as per the Scottish Government trawl, to decide. Local authorities, as I mentioned, get 6 months. All the time, communities are engaged in the process, so that's all the start times, or both of these start times start at the same time. The community timescale starts later after the local authority intimates what it's going to do, if anything. So, as I say, public bodies 1 month to respond. At the same time from that start period, local authorities 6 months. And community bodies 2 months after the 6 month period for local authorities. And that's why I went into some detail earlier about the local authority timescale, because if local authorities say after day 1, no, we're not interested and we're not helping the community body, which would be unusual because I've had very, very positive feedback from local authorities about the process and with the proactive BV project as well, and they are engaging. So I would expect local authorities to engage with communities and engage positively as well. So if there's any issues, they should be resolved locally, but the community body, as I say, gets 2 months. Now, if local authorities respond after a day, then that's, in my own opinion, that's a waste of 6 months for the community body. So the applicant submits an application, going through that. We will try and determine an application as quickly as possible, but as you'll realise yourselves, there are sometimes issues that need to be discussed, need to be resolved, and this, I've always said, and I said when I did Community Right to Buy, when I was developing that process, that the process itself, yes, it has its complexities, but the real challenges begin once you take ownership. So, you know, we're looking for well thought through proposals at the application stage, and we can then discuss with the community what its intentions are, etc. As I said, assessment of the application, we don't have to go to the panel. If there's a straightforward case, then we may well determine it ourselves. If it's either too high a risk, and we think it's too high a risk, we might disclaim. Now, I can describe in a wee bit more detail if you want me to later, Ewan, the impact and effect of disclaiming the property and any options that might arise. Because OPTS, and if the decision is to not to approve the application, that's not necessarily the end of the road for the community. There are other options. So, and then I've gone on to already describing the 8 months that the community would get to conclude the transfer. Public bodies and local authorities at this stage only get 3 months. Now, we've given communities longer because we don't expect them to have the necessary funds at that stage. So the 8-month period is a time to also raise funds. Bearing in mind, you're not paying, in most cases, you're not paying the whole value. It is £1 plus costs. So hopefully that makes it a lot easier for community bodies to purchase property under the scheme. I think it's back to you, David, for this slide for the OPTS criteria.
It is. Thanks very much, Richard. And I would say if you're on this event and you're looking at taking on a site, I would say the information on our website on what the criteria are, what we're assessing applications against is very, very useful. And I'll just briefly run through what we look at. There's 6 criteria that are considered. The first one's more of a yes/no. So it's about who is the group or body that's looking to buy the site for £1. Is it a public body, a local authority, charity, community group, or individual owner? Now, you don't have to be constituted when you're first looking to take on the site, but it's very important to know that you need to be constituted at least 2 months before the intended transfer date so that the KLTR has time to assess your governance, resilience, etc., and really whether you're a suitable organisation to take on the property. We then move on to 5 other criteria, and they're scored 20% for each. So public interest and benefits, so it's about economic and social regeneration, educational, social, cultural benefits, health and well-being, and access to the property. Then the definition of community. This is partly going back to what Richard was saying about what's the scale. Is it local authority? Is it a settlement? Is it perhaps a postcode? And how well defined is that? And secondly, the second part of the definition of community, is that inclusive or exclusive in terms of who could attend and use the facility? And of course, inclusivity scores much higher. Then community interest and support, we would look at, has contact been made with other relevant organisations operating in the area? Is there evidence of community support? And also, would the project and the use actually strengthen existing collaborations and relationships in that area? And then the last 2, I think, are quite self-explanatory. Sustainability and environmental impact. We're looking at what would be the social benefits and the economic benefits for the area if the project and the transfer goes ahead. And also, what do they do to improve the local environment and contribute to net zero? And the final one, I suppose it's more about us being content to make that transfer for £1 in the public interest. Does the project appear to be viable and well governed? So it's looking at, Does it have a business plan? Is the governance arrangements resilient where possible? Is there a track record? So I'll move on to the to the next slide now, and I think that's you again, Richard.
Okay, thanks, David.
Thanks.
Yep. Right. So OPTS. What I'll do, I'll go into, as I said earlier, I'll go into a couple of the criteria, public interest and sustainable development, not in great detail, given the time, but if you're okay, Ewan, I'll just spend a few minutes with each.
If you want to make sure that we've got time for Q&A.
Right, very briefly then, public interest. The public interest, it really is up to there's a general approach to public interest. I won't go into too much detail, but the general concept of public interest is to ensure that there's you're addressing the benefits, disbenefits in each case, about welfare, about well-being in the community, etc. We're all, a lot of people attending just now will be very familiar with public interest, but the key issue, I would say, is public interest generally is defined by the policy area and whatever suits. And I gave a description of how we've defined public interest in the case of OPTS being geographically. But there's other issues to consider as well. There's OPTS geographic definition, but there's also local issues. So the local public interest, the wider public interest, and whether it's not in the public interest to proceed. So we have to take into account a wide range of issues, local issues, including is it going to be if you're, for example, wanting to create a particular business as a community body, what impact is it going to have on similar local businesses within the area, or wider if it's a bigger business? That's just one example. If you're opening a children's play area in a very small community and there's already 5 children's play areas in the community, is there really a need? So we look at need within the community as well. What are the things that local communities normally would expect to have? What services? And are they already there? Could they be improved? Is it a better service? Is it a combined service? All of these things. So what's in the public service, public interest is, it can be objective. But given the time, I won't go into too much detail and skip on to sustainable development for OPTS. And in this case, for sustainable development, we use the Brundtland definition, same as community right to buy. No surprise, given I was involved in both. But again, it's taken sustainable development issues, social, economic, and environmental issues, looking at the plans that have been submitted with the application and seeing if they deliver sustainable development within the community. Now, how does it benefit the community socially? Does it meet as I mentioned there, does it meet the basic needs of a community? The level of support in sustainable development terms or sustainability terms, if there's a particularly low level of support, that may well reflect on the application in some cases that if the community is not behind it, is it really sustainable? Will it last a longer term? The economic benefits, what about economic growth? We don't require all 3 to be met, but we would really look for at least 2 being met to determine whether sustainable development box in effect can be ticked. And of course, environmental issues in sustainable development can be challenging. It might be that if you have proposals for a particular piece of land, in the shorter term, you might have to do something that is going to damage the land. But what's the longer term prospect for the property? Are you taking it back a step to move 2 steps forward and improving the property? So there's issues there about the environmental benefits. So all of these can be set out in a plan, a business plan, and in your application. We don't require a business plan. but it would be very helpful if a business plan was provided. We also don't at this stage expect communities to have all the issues well thought through and concluded. But we certainly look for direction of travel, particularly funding, because you'll get a stage later on for raising funds, etc. We would look for a flavour of what you're trying to achieve. So don't worry about having everything finalised. Talk to us about it. And in the slide, three properties. There's NIG, the NIG Community Hall that we've transferred to the NIG Community up top side of Inverness. I'll not say much, Craig, about Campsie High Kirk, but fantastic building that the community's taken on. We've transferred to them. The third property being an ex-garden centre down in Kirn in Ayrshire, which we auctioned after putting it through the OPTS process because the community didn't want it, the local authority didn't want it, and we had to consider other options. This was auctioned. It's then out with our hands what happens to it. So if a community does want to impact on the process, don't leave it to auction. So that's me rushing through this slide and onto the next one. This looks a busy slide. With obviously it's focusing on Campsie High again. Craig, I hope I don't steal your thunder here because it's based on the process timings and all that. You can see how sometimes how long it takes between us getting notified from a property in 2022, but we didn't get the application until later. So there's a lot of good time there to think about speaking to us about your proposals, how you're preparing the application, speaking to the local authority, start raising the funds if you can before the 8-month period. That's all good time for raising funds if you can. And we are happy to be involved in discussions with other parties. But skipping through this, we're notified of this is when the 3-year disclaimer period starts. We get the valuation. We then contact them and circulate the valuation with the trawl. Then we got the application in at this stage. We review the application and then we transferred the property in May 2025. So yes, it should be a fluent process, but like all processes, there's challenges along the way. The main thing is we speak about them. If anything arises, let's talk about them and let's see where we can go for there. And just very briefly, David, back over to you.
Thanks. I'm conscious we've eaten into question time, so I probably won't cover this in too much detail, but it's really to highlight it's almost a natural progression of the OPTS scheme. We're running a proactive bonification project, so it's got the same ultimate aims where we're looking at public interest and properties could be transferred for £1 provided it satisfies that criteria. But there's a change in that we're actually taking a proactive approach. So we're working with groups of local authorities to identify properties. And we've got some very useful data coming where Companies House have provided details or data rather of all dissolved Scottish registered companies for the past 10 years, and Registers of Scotland are searching those against the land registry. So we'll have that shortly. We're working with a number of local authorities and we'll work in blocks of around 3 months to explore are there properties that are suitable for reuse in the public interest. These could be taken on by local authorities, but they could also go to community groups. That's something we could maybe provide further detail on if people are interested or discuss in the question and answer, but it's not very exciting 2-year project. And I think we'll maybe just move to providing our
final slide.
Contact,
Okay.
yeah, that's great. Thank you. So, yeah, that's just to share. That's the contact details for the organisation. If you're interested in OPTS or the proactive BV scheme, I'm a bit of a dinosaur, so I'm not much good with QR codes, but I believe if you look at that, it will provide you with lots of exciting information. And yeah, thanks very much for the opportunity to share our work with you today.
Thank you very much to both of you. And David, QR codes have been around for ages.
I really am a dinosaur.
There's a QR code on a totem pole in Wester Hales that you can go and use. That's probably about 15 years old at least. So thank you very much. A couple of questions that have already come into the chat. So if you've got questions, I know we're going to eat into the break time and we'll maybe push it back ever so slightly.
Apologies.
Peter Node has asked my question. So at the very final point you made there about your proactive thing is maybe a wee bit like the example that Ronald McIntyre has put in the chat where Ireland are doing some mapping things. So that's really interesting, the combination there of Companies House information with Registers of Scotland. But I suppose two questions. How many cases per year are we talking about? And what's the total value from Peter Node? And then Ruth Noble is asking, are any being acquired for common good funds? I suppose that's when the local authority is maybe the one that's taking on ownership. And then I'll come to you, Elaine.
Okay, as far as statistics are concerned, we expect probably about 150 properties per year to be notified as BV, as ownerless. Not all of these obviously will go down the OPTS route, but we do think a very large number will. Because that's our priority for them. So at the moment, we're looking at, and I think it says in the guidance about 150, 190 at the time. So there are quite a few properties becoming available, and I think the new proactive BV project, which it does what it says in the tin, we're going out looking for ownerless property, will uncover hopefully more. So on a statistical basis, hopefully that answers the question.
And what about the value of, and I suppose there's two questions. There's a second question to that is the £1 thing, lovely.
Yeah.
But the other bit around costs, what on general, what is that?
Well, as I said, we would transfer property at £1 plus our costs, and that's irrespective of the value of the property, the actual market value of the property. Some properties have transferred at, we've had a property transfer at £1.5 million, and it was a very, very good quality property, obviously. Other properties, and I'll be absolutely honest with you, the properties come to us normally for good reason, because they're in a poor shape. And we have had properties, because of the amount of costs it would take to renovate, to demolish properties and start from scratch, they're valued at nil. Our costs vary depending on the property, but we keep costs to a minimum. We're looking at somewhere in the region of between £3,000 and £5,000. So if you've got a property that's £20,000, £30,000, £40,000, there's a benefit right from the start, a financial benefit. But I would certainly strongly argue that, and I have done so in developing the scheme, that the value is not just monetary. The value that we're getting from these properties is bringing them back into use and putting them to community benefit.
That's great. And I suppose the other question was, are any being purchased for common good funds when local authorities are maybe taking on ownership?
We haven't been, certainly I haven't been told specifically that property will go into the common good fund. Local authorities tend to look of themselves then with their proposals, and it's all down to money, to be honest, whether they have the money available or not to do anything with it, or if they know, for example, there's a Scottish Government drive to create houses. Are they suitable for housing? Do they have a developer in hand to take forward the proposals, etc., etc. So the Common Good Fund hasn't been raised yet, but again, we would look at that with other proposals. So happy to consider that.
Okay, thanks very much. Now, Elaine, and then I'll come to you, Al.
I'm going to be selfish and put two questions to you. One in relation to the community being constituted, the community body itself. my question is, would you be looking for an incorporated registered body, like a charity in some form, to be set up or in place, just so that the liability on the individual board members of that community body is reduced? And I guess also just to note that maybe if they're setting up a charity from scratch, they might not have their formal registration in place for a good, or kind of Oscar kind of registration in place for a good few months, because that can take a bit of time itself. And then my second question is about if it goes to the community, and this might be untested, but you might have thought about it. If unfortunately in a few years down the line they've tried really hard, it doesn't work, and they need to then think about, well, actually we need to sell this on. That's the decision we need to take, or we need to get rid of this. Would the community body then be able to sell it at the value of the market value of the property, or would that need to kind of come back into kilter in some way?
Two very good questions. Thanks very much, Elaine. On the constitution of the community body, we would expect the community body to be properly constituted. A limited company is the common way, and there's we created, when I was in Community Right to Buy, we created a model with HIE. We created a model constitution for community bodies, and I think it's still on the Community Right to Buy website. So I would guide you towards that. Limited company is the most common, but we can consider other types of bodies. That's explained in the OPTS guidance. There's a wee bit more detail in there. The body going through OPTS does not need to be a charity, but there are clear benefits in it being a charity. So we would leave the individual community bodies or community members to determine what the type of company is. And to be quite honest, if it looks okay to us, and there's community representation and the key issues of a community body, properly constituted community body in place, then we're unlikely to reject it. Now, and you can come back with supplementary questions if you like after I've addressed the second point. Second point was on where the community body, they try hard, can they sell the property if it doesn't work out? The short answer is yes. We've transferred ownership to you as the community body, so you're the owner, and we can't interfere with you then selling the property. You have at the moment we have ECHR rules that and protecting ownership, protecting property, etc., that we would take into account. I won't go into the details of Article and Protocol 1 or anything like that, but yes, you can. What I would say though is we do, at the point of transfer, we would normally issue a standard security. And we've discussed that with the Land Fund and others about the type of security and conditions of transfer. And the Land Fund is, I don't know if there's anybody here from the Land Fund, but the Land Fund is okay with the OPTS conditions, which are normally security and 50% clawback. Now, that's at the discretion of the KLTR. So if the community body was to retain the property, they don't need to worry about the clawback at all, because it only kicks in if you transfer the property. Now, I think it's only right to protect the public purse. Now, we do that in a way that we think is fair. So it would be normally 50% of the, to simplify it, of the profit. Right. So if you sell to a developer, we'll get half. But again, that's flexible, and the period is normally 5 years. So 5-year period, the clawback's finished, obviously. Hope that answers both questions.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And just thinking back on the kind of community body and the constitution form, I guess that might then be linked to viability of potential funders, because funders themselves will have requirements on what types of bodies they will fund. So that would be something the community would need to give itself anyway. So
yeah. And I think that's why I mentioned right at the start, where I was going through the process, try and think about funding as early as possible. Whether you want to take steps towards the land fund or other funders and go through your stage one, I wouldn't necessarily go through stage two formally at that early stage, because you've got another 8 months at the end of the period, but certainly take time at the start to consider funding. That's why we build in certain parts of the process, so that the community's got, I would say, a good amount of time to consider funding. We're not looking for detailed information application, you've got that time later. So if you were to say the property is going to cost 5,000, that includes legal fees. The proposals are going to cost 100,000. How are you proposing to get that money? You don't have to have it at that stage.
Great, thank you.
Thanks very much. That's good questions, Lane. Thank you very much. And Alan Bell, you've got a question.
Thanks, Ewan. Really interesting presentation. It's more an observation as much as anything, Richard. I was very interested in this sort of augmentation of the trawl process. I think my colleague Ian has also mentioned it in the chat. Is that I feel with the Scottish Government one, it's actually quite restrictive. It's really only SPFM bodies that get to put up their hand as such. And I think this is actually something we could perhaps learn from in terms of dealing with sort of wider public sector assets, that sometimes the opportunities aren't there for others because they don't know about it, and it's you can only know what you can know. And if it only goes to a Scottish Government body or a body covered by SPFM, then sometimes that opportunity is lost. So I think actually it's probably worth maybe a follow-up conversation, Richard, because I think I'm quite intrigued as to how you've gone about that and how you get it out there in terms of the local authorities and the likes of DTAS as well. I thought it was quite an interesting point.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Alan. In fairness to Scottish Government colleagues, the trawl is limited to public bodies, but it is part of the overall SPFM process for disposal of property. There's a whole section in the SPFM that relates to disposal of property, and the trawl is the first one. Now, and thanks very much for your comments. It's reassuring to hear, that you think it's something good to have done. How can it be improved? Well, that's something that we're going to look at. We've got a 2-year review coming up on the OPTS process. We reviewed it after 6 months. We reviewed it internally, sort of semi-internally, but with key stakeholders, key partners. The 2-year review will be more public. There'll be a public full review of, is it working as intended? How can we improve the process? So we're really digging into the detail of OPTS, and we genuinely do want feedback. So we'll come to that at the 2-year process. But just now, yes, it's reassuring that that's something positive. The SPFM does allow, after the Scottish Government trawl, for the owner of the property, whichever department it is, to then consider the best steps in the public interest. So they could head straight to auction, but we have purposely said up front that public interest and community ownership is very high on our agenda through the public interest, our definition of public interest. So, but that's very good to hear. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you very much. We've run over time for this session, but Richard and David, thank you very much for giving an overview. It was kind of what I hoped, that you would kind of explain some of the big picture stuff, but the process, drawing people's attention to what the process and what the opportunity kind of allows in all of this. So thank you very much to both of you for your time this morning, and we'll take let's take a 7-minute break until 11:10. Is that long enough to boil a kettle? And just 1 cup of water in it. And we'll start again at 11:10, and we'll hear what the experience was like from Craig Brooks' side. But obviously, Craig's colleague has already put a lovely comment in the chat saying what a good process it was with Kilter. So obviously, even though the transfers happened, there's still somebody's still saying something positive about it. So thanks very much, Richard. Craig, we'll see you at 11:10 and start then. Okay, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. It's 11:10, and so we've heard kind of the big picture, kind of arguably the establishment perspective from the King's Lord's Treasurer and Remembrancer about the OPTS process. And we're now going to hear about actually what it's like from a community perspective. And obviously, we've had a brief glimpse of the timeline that the Friends of Campsie High Kirk have been through in one of Richard's last slides. But we're now going to ask Craig Brooks from the Friends of Campsie High Kirk to share their story with us. So, Craig, over to you to start sharing your presentation.
Okay, thanks very much, folks, for asking me to speak today. Richard, that was a very good, and David, very good presentation. You covered the process of the KLTR PTS, and I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to come back to that, because I think that partly today is for me to talk about the success of the programme, but I think looking at the attendees, a lot of people from community councils, Historic Environment Scotland, a few other places as well. So I suppose, and I hope that I've gauged this right, is the interest would be, particularly for people approaching you, would be, how do you do this? How does this experience work for people? And I think that's where I'll go with this today. So really, firstly, I'll introduce myself, because this is process is what we talked about there, and I think what we need to talk about now is people, because it's people that make things happen, and the people makes the KLTR process. They then come to likes of ourselves, and we are people, and then we have to engage in process. So the two things have to be symbiotic, and not at the exclusion of each other. So a wee bit about myself. I didn't get involved in this project right at the start. Really, I was went to just an informal meeting at the Glazer Hotel when some locals who had been talking about this, really myself and Linda, I went along to listen in, and myself and Linda put our tuppence worth in, and somebody invited me to be the chair of the programme, which has turned into a full-time job. And I think the one thing I would say to anybody looking at this from the point of view of dealing with people in your community is it's fun, and you'll see in this today that there's a wee bit of humour involved in it, but it is fun. But you need commitment to it. So anybody doing this, I think they can't underestimate how much work's involved in it, and that'll become apparent as we go through. A wee bit about my background. I was an engineer for a number of years with Rolls-Royce. My main career was a police officer, and detective as well, and music. So three profiles there: somebody who was used to putting things together, somebody who's used to fixing problems, and somebody with an artistic slant, hopefully. The music was the least successful of my careers, I must say. My son's studying history at university, so that runs in the family, and this links into why I'm involved in this, and heritage and history has always been a big part of that. In terms of architecture, well, this is certainly a new venture, but everything you do in your past is an apprenticeship for what comes today and tomorrow, and that's worked out very much like this. In relation to architecture and heritage, I did introduce a lot of people to architecture and heritage in Her Majesty's Prison Berlin. So that was my previous involvement. So now I'm involved in this. Incidentally, we've just had a chap join the committee, he was the governor of Berlin Prison and Shotts, I believe, and also he was the Inspectorate of Prisons in Scotland. So a very good addition to this process. So right, today what we're going to talk about is, I'm not going to read the slides verbatim, certainly this one, the context, the history, design and preparation, the KLTR engagement, the process, the outcomes, and more importantly, what's in it for you. As I say, this is about people. So I think anybody who's going to take these processes on, you need to understand what it is you're trying to do. So I looked this up, and it's about community, and this is about community. What we are doing today is a community of people, and that.
Craig, can I just stop you just now? You've not shared your presentation with
I've
us.
not shared it.
No.
Oh, sorry. Right.
I was there. I thought I can hear clicking, so you're clicking because I thought you were just doing it.
Right, hang on.
That's starting.
That's it.
Yep, that's it. Smashing.
Right, sorry folks, technical problem. Like Richard, both of us are past that kind of technical age, I think. Right, so the first screen really covered, that's Campsie High Kirk, the building, as you can see there. The slides, its context, history, design preparation, KLTR engagement, the OPTS experience, the outcomes, and what's in it for you. So we'll move on to the next one. Understanding what you're doing and what you hope to get out of it. You know, look, if you look up the word community, it comes from the Latin communitas, meaning a community of the public spirit, which derived from Latin communis, meaning common or shared, sense of shared existence, mutual obligation and service and together. And what we're doing, and I think what most of this, and this is why heritage is extremely important, and it's explained in the next slide as a phrase that I use. I work in the West Island Way now, and I meet people from all over the world. And they ask about the history of Scotland and the heritage. And this dawned on me, but it turns out, as I come to the end of this presentation, there's actually, I wasn't the first person to think of this, and the landscape, the people and the heritage are inextricably linked. When we forget that, we forget ourselves. And this is why I think the emphasis on heritage in Scotland has to be magnified, and certainly where we have properties that are falling into disrepair and where maybe attention is elsewhere. I think the KLTR process is a major part of giving communities the ability to change outcomes in that respect. Now, I'm going to play a video here, which is going to be, it will say quite a lot, and this will run for a bit, I think about 2 minutes. And this was an STV interview, which will give you a good grasp of where we're going here.
Now, a group in East Dunbartonshire is looking to bring a 197-year-old derelict church back into community ownership. Friends of Campsie High Kirk in Lennoxtown will acquire the abandoned church for just £1 in May. The group's hoping to turn the old place of worship into an event space for the likes of theatre, performances, meetings and concerts. The group are now on the hunt for funding to bring the project to life. Iona Brownlee reports.
This church towers over Lennoxtown, but it's lain empty and abandoned since the 1980s. The community here want to give it a new lease of life and make the Campsie High Kirk a landmark building in the foothills of the Campsies once again.
The feasibility study is the stage we're at just now. That is quite an involved process that will take place over the next few months. We need to be at a position by the 12th of May, in fact before that, in order that we can take possession of this on behalf of the local community. It's a big project, it's ambitious, it's possibly some people might think we're slightly deluded, but you've got to think big, and I think you have to take action.
Campsie High Kirk was constructed in 1828 by architect David Hamilton and sits here in the middle of the village. But after a fire destroyed it in 1984, it has since been left abandoned. It was then added to the Buildings at Risk Register in 1990 and is now deemed an ownerless building. The idea is to turn the derelict building into an open plan space. It's a big job, with plans to put on a glass roof to make the place watertight. And they want to build a suspended balcony along the inside. But the big idea is to reconstruct the clock's tower that was lost in the fire using lights.
By preserving this, it could maybe create the impetus for putting David Hamilton back in the map, back in the public consciousness. So as an architect, I think he really is underappreciated. He's the reason that Glasgow looks the way it does and feels the way it does.
There's a real hope the project will attract more people to the village.
I think it's really important for the personality of Lennoxtown because it's a lovely place to live the way it is. We have world-class road cycling comes through Lennoxtown. We have access to the hills and the local scenery. And if we are really to take advantage of our built and natural heritage, this has to be one of the locations in Scotland where we do that.
Focus now turns to securing the future of the High Church and ensuring it remains part of the community. Iona Brownlee, STV News, Lennoxtown.
Now a group.
So that video probably persuades anybody as to why we need a roof As you see, I was getting quite wet during that interview. So a wee bit about the background. Lennoxtown is one of the more ancient areas in Scotland. The St Markin was the start of the religious community here in the 9th century. Prior to that, it was the Britons who lived in the area of Strathclyde on the other side of the Campsies, which you can see in the background there with the red. That's the original Campsie Glen Church there. The tribe who stayed here were called the Damanoni, and the other side were the Picts. We've had the Romans here, Wallace, the Jacobites, the Earls of Lennox, Scottish royalty, linked into Lord Darnley, and Thomas Muir of Hunter Hill, who was the father of Scottish democracy, who was sent to Australia for sedition. Why a blockbuster film about him has not been made is beyond me, and that's part of maybe what we'd like to maybe promote when we're out here about selling the story, because this area, as I say, we're kind of the poor relations of the Trossachs, but the area we're in has a lot of potential, and I think that's one of the things I think when going to the KLTR was to be able to sell not just the Kirk, and for us this is not just about the Kirk, this is about a much bigger picture. The Kirk is just the conduit for that. Looking at some pictures here, so basically the church, the main street, which is one of the problems is if you go through Lennoxtown, I don't mean this disrespectfully to the town planners, but one of the main reasons that we need the heritage saved here is we don't have much of it left. And if you drive along Lennoxtown Main Street, it's a masterclass in how not to do city plan. Things were not, it's just this, it's not conjoined, and that needs to be, it's being fixed. They are looking at it, but saving the heritage we have. And in this Kirk, as you see the picture, it sits right on a hill. It's like our Stirling Castle in the village. That's a very old picture of the Kirk, probably when it was first opened. So the Kirk was designed by a chap by the name of David Hamilton. He's known as the father of Scottish architecture, as James, who designed the ghost towers, we'll come to. James described him as Glasgow looking the way it does. Since David Hamilton, you have people who are probably more familiar would be likes of Charles Rennie Mackintosh, and then Greig Thompson, who are names that roll off people's tongues. However, David Hamilton designed the Gallery of Modern Art, which is probably one of the most famous buildings in the UK, but yet a lot of people couldn't name David Hamilton. A wee bit, maybe it's a pity John Logue's not listening to this, because the pictures to the side there at the bottom, well, you know the one in the middle, that's the Gallery of Modern Art. The girl at the bottom there is called Madeline Smith, or Madeline Hamilton Smith, and the chap at the top is called Perley Longley. And Madeline Smith is the granddaughter of David Hamilton. Madeline Smith stood trial, one of the most famous trials in Scotland, for murder by having supplied arsenic to Pierre Longley at Blythswood Square over a period of months. It was a relationship that wasn't going to go anywhere because of the different class, and they reckoned that she poisoned him. He died. He's buried in the Ramsholm Church in Glasgow. And she was, as you'll know about the not proven verdict in Scotland, which has just been, I think they're just about overturned that now. She got a not proven, and she became a socialite in America. So that's David Hamilton, a wee bit about him. We've got 3 A-listed buildings in the area: Lennox Castle, which is a ruin, Kincaid House, which I believe is being sold, and Campsie High Kirk, which is an A-listed building. Another chap associated with this is Reverend Norman MacLeod. Reverend Norman MacLeod was a moving and shaking in his time. He is buried at Lairn number 1 along with his family. His statue is at Glasgow Cathedral. He was at the Barony Church. He was a moderator of the General Assembly of Scotland, and he was also the chaplain to Queen Victoria. Now, some of you may have seen recently about Queen Victoria. And the reason I'm liking this is to show the background of Kirk and why it's saving and the interest in who's involved in it. It's reckoned that Queen Victoria had an affair with John Brown, which the film obviously John Brown, but she married him, they reckon, and possibly had a child. And Norman MacLeod on his deathbed confessed to having married John Brown to Queen Victoria under a clandestine marriage in Scotland. So that was in TV recently. There is quite substantial evidence now to suggest that there's something to it. Very, very quickly, Norman MacLeod, his mother wrote Sound the Pibroch, which was made famous by the Corries, and he wrote a tune called Curry's Brother Do Not Stumble, which was recorded by Glenn Campbell. They're not the only famous people connected. Lulu is meant to be coming to visit us, so been in touch with her management, and Mark Stranger, a really decent guy, and she's coming, and I've got a connection with my best friend is Ringo Starr's PA, and Ringo sent over a signed drum skin. That's myself and Michelle there with the skin, so that helped raise a bit of money to get the day-to-day funds involved in that. And the chap with the orange top in is Dennis Johnson, who's the SNP candidate for the next elections in our area, and he won the drum skin. So just time-wise, we could come back to this. I'm going to skip this video. This is a guy called Mark Struthers. It's on YouTube. If you go to look at Campsie High Kirk, it gives you a great fly past of the Kirk, but you can see it is quite a spectacular building. But I just want to be conscious of time here and move on. We can come back to that. And what I would say to anybody is there's so much to cram in here, and it's really important that I think you have an understanding to see what we did, that you could advise other people who come to speak to you about this. Anyone who wants to speak to us, pass on my details, obviously, to everybody. And if any community groups want to get in touch, email us, phone. Quite happy for you to hand out my number and email, obviously. Right. Okay, so that's the history. Now looking at the motivation. Eastern Bartonshire is a place that's got a lot of affluence, a lot of extreme affluence, but it actually does have some pockets of quite serious deprivation, including Lennoxtown. It's only top 10% of the deprivation index of Scotland. It's not a high crime area, but it certainly does need a bit of TLC, and this is one of the things is about using the Kirk to realise and release the potential in the area. And this is one of the big things. It's not just about a building, it's about so much more. It's about re-energising the community, tapping into self-belief, overcoming cynicism and apathy, which I would say are probably the two most infectious diseases in Scotland for sure, probably everywhere. The core plan is it's an A-listed building, as I say, it's simply not a building, and what appears to be a ruin is actually, in actual fact, it has so much potential. It's a jewel, and it's something that we have to realise, and this was a big part, I think, the selling point to the KLTR, was if you get a community group, you have to understand the building, you have to understand the area and the potential, because without that, you can't make a business plan, and you can't realise the potential of any premises to reinvigorate the community. And this is why I said about the start with the land, the heritage, and the people are inextricably linked. If you remove one of them, you have a problem. You'll see some pictures here. I'm going to come back to this, but we have to stabilise the building. There's quite significant work needing done. It was sold by the Church of Scotland in 1979. It was burned out by arson deliberately. Someone got to jail for it in 1984. It's been lying effectively abandoned. It's a beautiful ruin, but it was burned out, and it's been lying that way a long time. So there's a couple of phases to what we need to do. We need very significant work to stabilise it. That needs to get done in the next year or so, because the building is going south in the terms of its wear and tear. It is a strong building, but it does need the TLC right now. And then there's the next phase of actually realising its potential as a business investment. Obviously, we want to have it as an open air concept, but roofed, because the weather in Scotland is the most expensive version, but to make something sustainable. And obviously, when you're funding, you have to build sustainability into it. So we've had to think the option, what's the best option to make this building work and pay its way? And unfortunately, that's the most expensive option, but it's the best option. It'll be used for a variety of reasons: cultural, civic, economic, serenity garden, wellbeing space, weddings, photography, venue, gigs, community markets, and it'll be a major tourism anchor. And I'll explain what we think will actually seal that deal in terms of how it will advertise itself. Now, is there a precedent for this? We came up with the idea, and really pretty much the conversation we had around the table at the Glazer Bank is what is actually happening. But we did look elsewhere to see if anyone was doing something similar. And we discovered this, which is called the Bombed Out Church in Liverpool. Some of you may have been there. I've not been there, but we're actually going to go down to see it ourselves soon. We did speak to the director, and we found out one of the problems we were concerned about was the management of running a place. Once you get the bill ownership and all that, that's one thing, but you then have to run it. They actually run this place in a shoestring down there, not financial shoestring, but in terms of like the personnel, they managed to do it quite successfully. So that was reassuring. And that was one of the things that worried us about the business plan, about employing people and how many people will take to run. So as you can see, very similar building, similar period, has a potential for lighting, which we'll come back to. It's actually part of a war memorial, which is part of our church as well. But churches are... you know, our church is a graveyard. It's a church. It's not a place of death and decay. It's a place of life, and that's what we want to do with it, and in a respectful way. And that's what they've done down in Liverpool very successfully. Incidentally, we've got a German Luftwaffe pilot buried in our graveyard who was in a bombing raid to Greenock, and his friends flew from elsewhere, and they flew to Liverpool, and the bombed out church was actually destroyed the same night that Gerd Hansman, who's buried in our graveyard, was killed on a bombing raid to Greenock. So, but in fact, if I had more time to talk about this, there's a tremendous amount of synchronicity in what's going on in this building. It's quite spooky, to be honest with you. So anyway, a couple of pictures there, you'll see weddings and whatnot. We've got the same potential as this, slightly different delivery concept in terms of the structure, but it's all the same stuff, so it can be done. This all led on to the condition survey feasibility study, which is 99.9% finished now. As I say, this is not a vanity project, and I think this is where, if you're taking on a building like this, everybody wants to save heritage, but I think you need to reinvent heritage for more than just simply a vanity project to keep something nice. These buildings are functional buildings. This building was part of the community. It served a purpose. It was a spiritual purpose. If you look at society, and I know this through being a police officer, if you look at society and you look at the decline here, the relationship between the decline in community, the design or decline in spirit, and I don't mean religious spirit, I'm talking about community spirit, the separation, the rise in ego, individualism, all the stuff that I think maybe is not so good in society now. Is it any wonder, I think, when you see the secularism that's led to a breakdown in the cohesion in society, that is any number of the levels of depression, anxiety, self-harm, suicide and whatnot. That's part of what we're thinking here, because we do have a lot of deprivation in the village, we do have problems, and I think when we start to get premises like this and start repurposing it and recharging it as a spiritual, and I don't mean religious spiritual, but as a spirit, that is the way I think that Scotland needs to look at using its heritage, not just as it's a nice building. What's it doing for the community? What's it putting back in? And really, I know it sounds a bit hippie, but if you listen to the building will tell you, and I always say to people, when you go to these buildings, have a conversation with it. It unlocks channels in your mind as to what its potential is. Now, I won't go through this. This is all the people here that it's taken to get us to the stage, which is the architects, the engineers, artists, design engineer for the ghost tower, drones, and quantity surveyors. The picture in the next one is what you'll see. This is the ghost tower. Excuse me. Part of this, the top third of the tower was lost in the fire because it came unstable. And we thought about putting a lighting structure up here, but James had the very good idea that overturned my idea, which was a nonsense, to be honest with you, but I knew it had to be a lighting structure. And he said, why don't we just replicate what was there in the first place? And this will be magnificent and imposing, particularly at night time. It will be an advert because it will be repeatable. People will photograph it. And I think it has the potential to become probably as well known, and I might be shooting my mouth off here, but you know, things like the Gallery of Modern Art, you know, something simple like a traffic cone on top of the Duke of Wellington's head made that world famous. Now, we're not putting a traffic cone up here on top of this, albeit it might look quite funny, but we're going to do this with it. And you've got the Kelpies, these become world famous, and that's what attracts tourism. People get the curiosity to go look at it. So that is our lure. On the subject of allure, we have had a lot of press, a lot of attention, and as you can see, we had Angus Robertson, and we've got a variety of people there connected with. You can see Richard down at the front and Bobby Sandeman next to Angus. He came out and visited the premises, which was a seal of approval from the Scottish Government. So that is a fantastic thing. And considering we only really got off the ground properly in February 24 to March 25 to get the government to your door, it's reasonably good going, I would say. And I think that is hopefully part of what the energy that we brought to this, because we knew we had to create an energy and an energy wave. And I hope that I communicate this. I looked up a thing quite recently about the Campsie High Kirk, and it had my name on it. And it said, oh, Craig Brooks, the chair, he said he's the public face of Campsie Community Council. And so I suppose I am the public face. And if my energy doesn't communicate, then we're in trouble, because that's my job in all of this, and I hope I do that today. And I think when you're looking at any people in community groups that come to you, the KLTR, or I know they do this anyway, but in terms of like the local councils we've got here or Historic Environment Scotland, I think it's that energy we're trying to tap into, because this comes back to the people involved in the process. People bring energy with them. So really good day. That's Bobby meeting Angus and Ewan, who's the architect, and Linda, who's our treasurer in the background there. It was a fantastic day. Angus was really, really engaged. I know he's coming in for a wee bit of flack just now with Historic Environment Scotland, but the one thing I was really impressed with Angus was he told me he was a tour guide in the Royal Mile. He gets it. He's not, I mean, I know he's a minister and all that goes with that, but he actually gets it, and that immediately is what clicked with me. This was just through a sin for it. I actually had to sleep in the tower the night before, because we set up the infrastructure for the meeting the next day. So that is my bed on the left, and that's my view looking up the tower. I think I'm the first person to sleep in it in 200 years. Cold night, and it was more pigeon droppings I was concerned about. So talking about the concept and where, and this is all going to come back to the KLTR process, so don't worry about that, Richard, I'm going to get to that. This is what I did say to Angus. This is straight from the address I wrote. Take this message back to the First Minister and the Scottish Parliament, not just about building a community, but about what happens when the system empowers people to fix what is in their line of sight. Take some of this energy back with you, as that is what empowers you to fix what's in your line of sight, so we can fix what's in ours. That's how the system should work most anywhere in the world. It's the basis of a successful circular economy, and that is community empowerment, activated from the ground up, enabled from the top down. And I thought that's just not a grand statement. I really, really believe that, because I think that's what we need to do in Scotland and UK, starting tapping into all the potential in the communities, instead of government trying to fix everything, devolve it down to the local communities. And I hope and think that was a big part of the KLTR process. They recognised that there's a potential here to tap into local communities. And we'll come back to this, the Community Empowerment Act, and why I think that was a big part of what informed Richard's thinking. They'll maybe come back with me in that, but certainly it puts meat in the bones of that act. Skip this one here. This is to keep your attention in case I'm boring you silly by this point in time, but if anyone can come up with a caption for this one, this was myself and Angus. Now, we're going to come on to the KLTR OPTS experience. You can read the screen here, but I'm going to read this off. So the KLTR OPTS process, it's not a transfer process, it's a national mechanism for unlocking potential. It turns vision into lawful stewardship, designed to support regeneration and community ownership. It linked in very much with our council plan, in fact 100%, and that's key, and I think that must apply all over, because the council has to be on board, obviously a big part of that process. We didn't only have to persuade the KLTR, we had to persuade the council, and quite successfully so, that we did have a plan and there was reasons for doing it. The strategic position sits at an intersection of the national mechanism and local policy. As I say, we're on the deprivation index, and it's a heritage building. So why is this important to SURF? Well, your mission is to reduce deprivation, strengthen resilience, rebuild communities. Our project's part of that, and it aligns with the national structure, local authority, and a live example of what the KLTR are trying to do, and I think what SURF are trying to promote, which is changing outcomes in Scotland. The OPTS experience and what it taught us, well, it's not bureaucracy, it's human enabling partnership, a structured apprenticeship and empowerment, and it is an apprenticeship because you start off with this as amateurs, clueless effectively, and you learn on the job, and we'll come back to that as well. But you know, I'd say now I'm fairly well informed, but I've still got a long way to go, because this is the first chapter. Taking ownership of the keys is the first chapter. The next stage is funding, capital funding, building, all that kind of stuff. So this is going to be, this is more or less a however long it takes, a 4 or 5 year apprenticeship, by the end of which we'll be experts, or we should be. What did the KLTR really do? I think this is the one thing that stand out. It actually got us match fit, and I'm going to come back to the process of how this happened, because as Richard rightly pointed out, they're not expecting you as a community group to come to them in day one with all your ducks in a row. I think they expect you to have a good idea where you want to go, but part of our process was fantastic, and I know Michelle's listening, but this is very much what we'll come back to, about how KLTR is part of getting you ready to apply, get you match fit. And it's a much, much bigger thing than simply getting match fit for their application, because you need to satisfy a lot of other tick boxes to really be there. It forced clarity, evidence, discipline, and realism. I hope some of that comes across in what I was trying to say earlier on about why are we doing this, what's the reason, what's the motivation, what's the commitment involved, the time commitment, the personal commitment, the belief, because if you don't believe it, no one else will. The standards, as I say, you know, again, when you see the behaviour and the manner of the KLTR staff, that sets a benchmark that we have to ensure that we, as non-professionals, we perform as professionals, because really anything short of that's unacceptable. Communication, governance, risk, documentation, resilience, all these things we need to look at. All this set the benchmark, and it was more so we were treated as I say, participants and not petitioners. That's really important. At some point, they stand back and say, right, put an application in, and it has to be the real deal, or the game's off. But up to that point, it was a partnership, and that's the way it should happen, and it works very successfully, because it gets you to that point where you're ready to put your application in your match fit. As I say, empowerment became real, measurable, and structured. Now, this might sound like I'm blowing smoke up Richard's ass here, excuse my language, but there's a reason for this. So we've got John Logue, the Crown Agent, Constitutional and Law Authority, the Trust of the Crown. Bobby Sandeman, Chief Executive, he's operational backbone. As an individual, what I picked up from him was precision and integrity. From Richard, who is the person who probably got to know the best out of this, he's policy operations, communications, and all this, the PTS scheme. Richard's got, as you'll have gathered, listening to him, he's got a quiet authority about him, leadership, balance, and a high degree of social and strategic intelligence. Now, anyone listening to this and didn't pick that up from Richard probably had him on mute, because that's what Richard gives over. And that is getting us match fit, because we have to, I have to carry the energy, but us as a group, we have to represent all these different personalities that we see, because to some degree we have to mirror them, because if we don't mirror them, we won't deliver. And I think that's what Richard might, we'll come back to that later, but I think you might, well, I hope you agree with that. Paul, who was basically the day-to-day manager, fantastic bloke, as I say, high standards, momentum. Alan, who's an ex-police officer, I believe, again, he was involved in the process. And ultimately what you've got here is a process that individuals are defined by belief, professionalism, communication skill, critical thinking, personal integrity, flexibility, genuine reassurance, and not shy to give tactical counsel and readjustment advice, which is, if you're talking bollocks, basically, they'll tell you. And that's what they did. But that description of them ultimately has to describe us, because if it doesn't, then it's not going to work. And that is the reassurance that I think the KLTR have to have of any group, and any group coming to you as a council or a funder, be it Heritage Environment Scotland, National Lottery. That's, I think, what you're looking for, at least I hope. So I'm going to take you through a picture journey here. Where am I time-wise? Where am I sitting?
We're at 2:45 and we're due to finish at 12, so...
Right, okay, I'll batter on. Right. So this
6 minutes.
Right, this is going to be a fairly quick and easy part. So this is a journey in pictures. So this is the original committee, minus one or two that sat around the table. And it went from that. So what I'm going to do here is show just in very simple picture terms, without too much language, about what's involved in all the moving parts. Now, you're all experts and professionals in your field. But from our point of view, this is what we had to put in place. And this comes back to the getting match fit, which is very much what the KLTR do as part of that process. They don't stand back. Everything and everybody that I'm going to mention from here on in was pretty much involved with the KLTR process proactively in Teams meetings, for talking sake. So it started off with a small group of people. We then went to the Campsie Community Council. We looked at the environment, the landscape, the heritage, etc., etc. We had to decide, is there something in this? We did, and we knew what it was. We had a clear vision in our heads. The building told us it. I know it sounds hippie, but the building is the one that's directing us in this. Excuse me, just my voice is going here. Hang on. These buildings have been here a lot longer than us, and if you listen to them, they'll tell you. Now, as I say, I'm not suggesting here it's metaphysical or ghosts or whatnot. I don't mean it that way, but I mean it unlocks things, it unlocks channels in your mind, a framework that allows you to see other possibilities. Thinking, it allows you to think out of the box, and that's what I mean by this. So we went to the community. We got 99.6% support. We petitioned everybody, about 4,000 or 5,000 people. We had one lady who, I don't know where she got this from, a public meeting, who I was told afterwards to say that she wasn't supporting us because we weren't digging up the graveyard to build things. Now, I don't know where she got this idea that we were going to be digging up bodies, but that is not the case. But I think she was the only person that objected out the whole town. So that's quite a good result. You then have to tie in the politicians and the council. So Susan Murray, Rona Mackay and Paul Ferretti have been extremely helpful in this process, all very, very much engaged. Heather Holland, who's the Executive Chief Planning Officer, was fantastic. She came up, spent hours with it, because we've taken on ownership of this, but it's not just us, it's a partnership. The partnership with the KLTR, yeah, we've taken the keys off them, but that partnership's not finished, because they're part of this journey. Because if this turns out to be a success, then they're part of that story. And you know, myself and Richard and the KLTR, we'll be in touch for years. It's not a case there's the keys and away you go, because this is about how you bring other people through the process. And this is why I'm saying, you know, if you're speaking to the KLTR, anyone who wants to know how to do this, providing it does get as far as you want to go, get in touch with us, because we can talk people through it, because we've had to go through the process. The Chief Executive, Anne Davey, obviously she's the figurehead. We haven't had so much direct deals with Anne Davey, but this is important. You have all these people on board. And I think, no, I don't think we did satisfy them, because the East Remembrancer Council had to write in to the KLTR explaining that they supported our vision as well as the vision of utilising an ownerless building. So how does the Scottish Government came up with the Community Empowerment Act 2015. That kind of links into what the KLTR are doing, in as much that they're going to community groups. You can see the arrows here. This is a bit amateurish, but if you follow this, comes to community groups with an idea. We then have to then look, how do we develop this idea? What is it we're doing here? So these are the groups for talking something. No, I think this is pretty much all of them. Community Land Scotland were the first people we spoke to. They put us in touch with a number of other people, DTAS, Community Ownership Support Service, East Remembrancer Voluntary Action, Community Enterprise. They were intrinsic to this whole process, and any groups who are planning to do this, these are tremendous resources. They were not people who sat on the sidelines. They were very proactively involved, and Richard, as you remember, they were all involved in the actual online meetings. They get you match fit. It's like having a lot of coaches round about you saying, here you go, we'll help this. And to be honest with you, it'd be probably nigh impossible task. Not impossible, but a much more difficult task. You then need to go to the community. We did that, great response from the community, but we had to have a story to tell them. We had to have a reason to do it. We had to reinvent them, because they say cynicism, apathy. The building's been lying there for 40 years. It's around. How are you going to turn that around? You need to come to them with a case, and a convincing case, and we've done that. East Remembrancer Council, we then became a SCIO. We consulted other groups, because you're looking at the bigger picture down the road, also the nature of the building, what you're going to do with it. So Historic Environment Scotland, whilst we're not at the stage of applying to Historic Environment Scotland, we're not quite yet for money or the planning side, so we're getting near it, or certainly the Heritage Lottery Fund or any other funders. You're continually building towards that landscape, where you have to understand the landscape, so to speak. how they work, how they think and how they operate. And we have reached out to the Heritage Fund, Lottery Fund, Historic Marine Scotland, and developed relationships with them. It means we can go to them and say, what do you think? And that's the next stage we're at, really. All that led to the point where we could then take on legal ownership. Thornton's Law were the solicitors we used, and Anderson Strathearn were the KLTR solicitors. That was a really easy process, to be honest with you. And the title deeds and whatnot, and the keys were handed over. This all led to the feasibility conditions survey. A lot of media. We have the energy that we've built up over the last years brought the Herald, some of the major newspaper tabloids with the TV companies involved or interested, and Scottish television and whatnot. So we've raised the profile quite significantly on a national stage. As I say, it's all part of that energy that you bring to a project. That ties in with yourself to SURF, because really that's the framework I think you're trying to promote across Scotland, is to enable people, fix it from the top down, enable it from the bottom up. I think the phrase I said earlier on. So we're now, well, here we are today with SURF sitting at a table with basically talking to most of the councils in Scotland. So again, that's this community thing. This is how it should work. People speaking to each other, not about process, but about process and people. So the next thing is, this is the bit where it gets interesting, is that this is where we go, you know, that we need a lot of that. There's no doubt about it. So we'll come back to that. So why does the KLTR OPTS matter? It's not just a legal tool, it's a conduit for change, reimagination, regeneration, by empowerment of communities to fix what's in a line of sight, but having fixed what's in theirs. That's what it does. It proves that communities rise when given a fair structure. It shows policy can breathe. It models what I think Scotland needs nationally: trust, clarity, rigour and partnership. It shows how abandoned assets can be economic engines. It shows that our heritage it comes back to the landscape. The heritage of the people are inextricably linked. The heritage is one of the reasons people come to Scotland from all over the world. The concept of allowing it to fall down is nonsense. And let's not go down that rabbit hole just now, but I could talk here for about an hour about some of the problems I think that governments, so maybe, and I know things are tight, but at the same time, the heritage is incredibly important. It is a template that can be replicated across Scotland. We hope that we can lead into that. We've been monitoring, because when people ask you, how did you do that? You know, we've actually had to start writing down. We've got a book written, more or less, the first chapter, that explains how we did this. That may be of benefit to other people, but it's so that we understand how we did it and just how much is involved in this process. Right, where are we? We're getting there. Right, so why does this matter for SURF? Right, so let's see if we agree with this. SURF works in the places where these fractures hit hardest. Regeneration is not just physical, it's human and cultural. Restoring community purpose is central to rebuilding social fabric. Heritage-led regeneration fits SURF mission perfectly, I think. Regeneration is not economics, it's identity, and that's a really important thing, because our heritage is our identity in Scotland, the land, the hills as well, but the heritage is the checkbook that we wrote it on. So why the KLTR is critical: it gives responsibility back to communities, it gives them trust, structure, real empowerment, as I say, gets you match fit, forces clarity, evidence, teamwork, discipline. It builds capacity, confidence, or local pride. It turns abandoned assets into community catalysts and rebuilds the muscle memory of belonging. I think that's quite important, because I think that's what we've forgotten in society. Rebuilds the muscle memory of belonging. I like that. So I think that's what we need to do, because when you look at the number of people who have forgotten about community and society, I think that's where a lot of the ills come from. The OPTS is not a process, it's a cultural intervention, and I think that's another way of putting this as well. It's much more than simply a legislative process, it's about changing outcomes. And that really brought us to here. This is the family album here. So there's some pictures. Lord Provost, we've had the Lord Lieutenant was there, the King's representative. So we've had basically royal, I wouldn't say approval, but certainly interest. Argyll and Southern Highlanders, the commanding officer who's retired now, still in Castleview, was there. Members of Parliament, etc., etc. Again, we've got John, Bobby, and Richard hiding in the background there. So this was the keys getting handed over, and you can see there's a key, big key. That's not the key, we bought that, but it's a big old-fashioned key. I'll play this video very quickly. This is what we think, well, this is what the place will look like, and this will, I'll sit back and give you a few seconds respite from my voice. So I think if you look at that video, you'll see it has, and if you look at the Kirk there as it currently is, that's quite a nice picture. We'll get the backdrop with the Campsies and we do, that is what this place looks like. So we have, it's not just the building that's beautiful, it's the area. You get the Cannon Valley, Fintry, Strathblane, we call it the Campsie Corridor. And this is this building is a fulcrum for regenerating the community, but bringing tourism to the area, because what we need to do is bring in new money. That's part of the process here, part of the deal. And it's not just looking at this building, it's looking at other things in the area, like Lennox Castle, which is an unlost property in the true sense. I know the KLTR had to look at that. We are looking at that, and if this is a success, I think we'll revisit that. So really, this is the whole point. It's about the landscape, the heritage, and the people. Now, we've got a chap here, Ronald McIntyre, who is in the meeting here. Now, Ewan, can you...
I'm here.
Is Ronald there? Can you bring him in? Is that too difficult?
Ronald can, if Ronald's still on the call, he can unmute himself. If
Ronald, are you there?
No, he's not. He's not.
Right.
He's left.
Right, Ronald's a Gaelic speaker. He comes from Ardnamurchan, and so he sent that this was a phrase which was similar to the phrase I came up with about the landscape and the heritage and the people. In actual fact, the Gaels came up with this a long time ago. I just happened to have tapped into it somehow. So it's Anchir and Canon Snowdonia, which means the land, the language, and the people. And that comes back to what we're trying to do here, is to tap into our national assets, to tap into the natural assets, and the biggest asset is people. And I think that's the biggest thing about the KLTR process, is it brings people together and it reunites them with their heritage, and it enables them to empower themselves through empowering the heritage. And I think the trick is, what I said to Angus Robertson was about government, and I'm not straying into politics here, but I really believe this, that one of the mistakes that maybe government make is they try to fix too much and overpromise. Devolve it down to the local people, because we know what the problems are in the local area. We know what we can do with it. Just enable it to happen. And I think this is why I would say maybe to the funders as well. You know, I think if you're going to fund things, then you'll be looking for, well, I'm not preaching here, but you're looking for that energy and belief, because you know, if you invest in the heritage, I can't remember the figures that they're elsewhere, but they say for every £1 that you invest, it generates something like £1.70 back. This is, I think that's Historic England, Historic Environment Scotland figures that I got that from. So it can be done. Now, I'm not kidding you here. This is not going to be a cheap option, but I think it has not just local potential, it has national potential, it has UK national potential, and I do think that this will become, potentially with a ghost tower on it, it'll become iconic internationally, and it'll be something else that I think Scotland could be proud of. So it's a tall order. If I didn't think it was possible, I wouldn't have taken it on. If it doesn't succeed, then on the other side of those hills there, that's the Campsies. Fintry is on the other side of that. So if it's a major failure, I'm going to have to move to Fintry. So with that, folks, I know
Fintry quite well, so don't go there.
So with that, folks, I think hopefully that explains their experience. I know we've got a very short period of time here, but the KLTR process has been fantastic. There are some things that we picked up on it that maybe I've been very, very quickly. Now, this is not...
So tell us what you would change. Give us two things that you would like to see change in Kilter.
Nothing.
Okay.
Okay, but what I'm going to tell you is the things that we learned from this process that I think Kilter or KLTR could look at, and this is about the enablement process. Now, some of this is maybe peculiar to us, but the systemic barriers, and this might interest everybody, but we've actually written to Westminster through an MP a very detailed document on VAT relief. This idea that we have to pay 20% back to the government for any funding we get is an absolute nonsense. It's more or less washing money through the system to give them it back, but it's meant to be ring-fenced for heritage. That's a long story. I've done a 12-page report followed up by a 38-page report, which we're hoping to get on the Chancellor's desk. We're a grassroots group. I know I've spoken to a lot of big agencies. They said, oh, the government's not listening. We keep talking about this. We're going from... We're ankle biters, so we're going from that. We're going for that angle, and I think we've put a very, very good report together, which we're calling a heritage exemption certificate, and I can send that out to anyone that's interested in it.
If you send it to us, we can share it with the group. If you send it to us immediately after this, we'll share it with the slides afterwards.
The other thing is insurance. I think there needs to be a conversation with the Federation of Insurance through the government, because particularly where you're taking on a premise like this through the KLTR. Now, you can see the state of the building. It's almost impossible to insure. For us to insure this straight away, we've been told that we would be looking, we don't have an income just now. We'd be talking an absolute minimum. If we got it at steel, you'd be talking £5,000 a year just for public liability insurance. That's impossible for a group like us. What we've had to do is we got local funding from East Bartonshire Council, which is fantastic, and we've bought Harris fencing, and the fencing's going up round about the building. That actually, you don't actually legally have to have insurance, it turns out, and I did check that given my background. You don't, but you do need to protect the property. So we decided to buy the fencing, because to actually hire fencing for the time that we're going to have it up here would be about £40,000. Yeah. So we bought it for £3,000. So insurance is an issue. I think there might have to be, there could be discussions about how that could develop. So you've got the VAT, and the other thing I think is also, we discussed this with Richard, and I think this is a much bigger conversation, and this is where the Heritage Environment Scotland and the National Lottery people we have had this conversation kind of informally, but I think there's a formal discussion, and I think it kind of does happen, because it did happen with us. When community groups go into this system, it's all a bit vague. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of different groups, and you're trying to figure out, how do these people walk into each other? And the difference is, you're an amateur, they're all professionals, and they understand how each other works, but as amateurs, you don't, and it can be a wee bit daunting. And we were asking lots of questions, and that's my nature, is to ask questions. That's my career, and I kept asking, I kept answering, and I think all I would say is that part of the process of getting to the stage of, you know, you've got all the groups involved, the support groups, you get architects, you're borrowing money to design plans, you're building castles in the air rather. But the one thing that you don't know for sure until you get further down the line is the fact that you are going to get, it's not you are going to get support, but at least that there is some nominal interest and tentative support for what you're doing. I think that could be particularly part of the process. I think you could have Historic Environment Scotland and the National Lottery and some of the bigger funders, the mainstream funders, more engaged in that process in a non-committal way. And the reason I think it would work would be because groups like us, I don't know whether sometimes groups are, these big agencies are a wee bit standoffish, and as much that they don't want to get involved too early because it might be seen as a commitment. I would say that if that is the case, that's not the case. And the reason I can tell you that is because it's all about getting match fit. And that's what the KLTR does. But they made very clear from it, listen, we think you've got a good idea. You need to convince us of this. And no matter
Craig, I'm going to stop you just now.
Yep.
Because we're over time. We're losing people because it's 12 o'clock. Sorry. Because I wanted to, I suppose, a couple of comments.
Right.
Fantastic project. Yes, it completely aligns. We're Surf are looking for holistic approaches to regeneration, and that's what you're talking about. And I think what you said around it's not about just saving a building. That, I'll confess my background is in heritage, and the people who are on this call from Historic Environment Scotland have Pauline has put comments in the chat, and there is no point. There's rarely a point in saving a building without a much wider purpose around it. It's the people that count. If the people didn't exist, there wouldn't be much point in keeping the heritage. We're not keeping the heritage for aliens to visit at some point in the future. We're keeping it because it's of value to us now. So I think you've explained that really well. But the other comment I'd make for all our speakers, I would say it's incredibly rare for us to have presentations where a public body is spoken of quite so highly around a process such as this. It's very, very rare. So I'd say it's really great that you've had that experience, Craig, but I would say Richard and David, you can obviously take that back to the team to say that is unusual and exceptional, that you have enabled the community to do this, that you've been supportive of them through this process. So it's really heartening to hear that, and obviously what Craig has sort of ended on there is that there's learning that other institutions could take from that, and that will always be a challenge, particularly for very large organisations. It will probably always be a challenge, and KLTR is the newer one involved in this area, so you'll be able to be fleet of foot, and also your background, Richard, in the community empowerment agenda has obviously kind of bled through into that. We've not had any more questions. I think you've answered a lot of the questions in your presentation, Craig. I've loved how small Scotland is, and the fact that Robert Singer was at Dundee with James. That is the nature of Scotland, and the fact that a number of people have visited the Liverpool church and recommend it for going to for a venue, and for you as a model to look at as well. So I would just like to bring today to an end, to thank all of you for your presentations. Our next People in Place network will be in January. Part of it will be looking at the Surf Manifesto, which our board just signed off yesterday, and that'll be launched in January, and we'll be talking a bit about that at the next one, as well as another speaker as well. But thank you very much for your time today. For those of you who have sacrificed going to Scotland's Towns Partnerships Conference, we're grateful. I'm sure you haven't really sacrificed it, maybe you couldn't go, but we're aware that we were competing with something quite high profile today, so we appreciate your engagement today, and hope everybody has a good rest of the week and a good weekend when it comes.